I would like to welcome everyone to our webinar on page object model in Selenium. This is Virendra Singh from ToolsQA.com, and I have Laksh with me, who would be assisting us in the webinar. This webinar is focused on the concept of page object model in Selenium. In this webinar, we should be able to understand the basic idea of page object model and how we can implement a very simple page object model. All right, so let me just quickly take you through the agenda. The agenda for today is the very first thing that we want to learn is what is page object model. Then we will try to understand how we can visualize a page so that we can create a page object model out of it. And then we will talk about the facilities that Selenium provides us to create page object model. We will see what are the different annotations. For example, @find by annotation, we will talk about that annotation as a third topic. And then we will talk about the page object factory static class that Selenium gives us. After the fourth item, we would take a break and we would try to pick up some questions. And once we are done with the questions, we will move on to create a page object model out of a login page. So we have a small login page on our demo website. We can just go there and create a page object model out of the login functionality on the page. So once we understand the requirements of a login module, we will talk about the benefits of page object model, and then we will talk about what is next that you can learn so that you can completely understand the concept of page object model and you can successfully implement it in your project, in your company. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So this is pretty much it in the agenda today. So let me just quickly move on to the first item that we have. The first item is what is page object model? So before even we start into the depth of the topic, we have to define page object model. So there are a couple of definitions across the web. You can just find one definition and you would get what page object model is. But if you want to understand it in the true sense, you have to start visualizing a page as uh, as a module which is not a collection of web elements, but it's a module which helps you interact with the application. So before we go into the visualization part, let me just quickly read out the definition of page object model. We also refer to page object model as POM. POM stands for page object model, and it is basically a design pattern that has come up after years of problem solving that many experienced people in the industry, they came up with a set of problems, and to solve the set of problems they came up with a design pattern, and that design pattern is POM. So a design pattern is nothing but a set of guidelines and suggestions that someone gives based out of his or her experience, and it is a well-established concept also, so that makes it a design pattern. So reading out definition, page object model is a design pattern in which a page is visualized as an interface to interact with a part of the application. So taking an example of the login page, it's basically a small module which helps you log in into the application, right? So from the user point of view, it is basically an interface to log in into the application. Now, once you have visualized your module as an interface to interact with the application, then all you have to do is just create an object-oriented class around the interface, around that interface, and there you go, you will get your page object model. So right now the definition is theoretical, that's fine, but soon we will see how this theoretical definition will convert into actual code. So this is the definition, and if you are lost at this point in time, let me just clarify a couple of more things. What this pattern suggests is that we stop looking at the page as collection of elements, but start looking at it as a collection of services. So a page, if you look at a web page, you would see that a web page is not just a collection of elements. It's an organized collection of elements which helps you do certain tasks. So if you go to our website, let me just take some tangible examples. So for example, when we go to our website, toolsqa.com, when you go there, uh, the home page, it's basically, you can see it as a collection of elements, but at the same time you can visualize it uh, as an interface to do a couple of things. For example, I want to read some tutorials, so all you have to do is just hover your mouse over a tutorial, and then you can select the tutorial that you want. You can go to Selenium C Sharp, Selenium in Java, but the whole idea is that it's not just collection of elements, it's basically letting you do things on a page. All right, so I will not emphasize more on this part, and we will see it in the code when we will actually write something out. Now that is again the visualization part, and in this visualization part, we will be taking an example of the login page. So let me just take you to our demo website, which is store.demoqa.com. On this website, we have the My Account link. If you click on the link, it will take you to a login module. This is the login module, and in the login module, there are three elements, three primary elements. The first one is username, the second one is password, and then you have the login button. So if you want to log in, you will have to do 3 steps. First step is to write something in the username field, then enter the password, and then click on the login button. And then there is this fourth element, which is remember me. So if you want to save your session or your cookies on the system, you can just click on the remember me button also. So this is a login page, but now we just talked about the login page in terms of the elements that are present here. What if we want to talk about the same module in terms of services it provides? So if I open my notepad, so if you look at this module, it provides you 2 basic services. It lets you log in without saving without saving cookies, which is without clicking on the remember button. And then it lets you log in with cookies saved. Right. So these are the 2 functionalities that this particular module provides. Now, once you talk in terms of functionality, you move one step closer towards the page object model. Right. So coming back to the slide, you can see that we have just explained whatever is written here with an example. So the login page has 4 elements, and then when we want to visualize it, we can visualize it as a service interface to login, or a service or an interface to login with remember me functionality, right? So these are the 2 functionalities that your login module will give you. All right, so once you have visualized the class, it's all about creating once you have visualized your page, it's all about creating a class. A class is a Java class, right? Or any programming language that you're using. Basically, it's an object-oriented class that you want to create in order to make a page object model. Now, how can you do that? All you have to do is just go back to your Eclipse environment. Now, before I go back to my Eclipse environment, I would like to give you a small understanding of this particular project. This particular project has the project name is Page Object Model. It has 2 packages, Page Objects and Tests, and then we have referenced the Selenium libraries. So this particular session would be centered around Selenium. So we have just added Selenium libraries. In the 2 packages, in the test package, I have created a dummy test. This dummy test does nothing, but it instantiates a Chrome driver. It navigates to the store.demoqa.com page. And then in the test, there is only one test, which is an invalid login test. All it does is it finds the My Account link, clicks on it, then finds the username field, enters the username, finds the password field, enters the password, and then finds the login button and then click on the login button. So that's all it does. So it clicks, it tries to log in, and it performs all the steps that are required to log in. So there are basically 4 steps that you have to do in order to log in, and you do all these 4 steps right here in the test, right? And once the test is over, there is a tear down method, which basically should be after method. All it does, it closes the browser. That's all it does. So this is a basic test written in TestNG, which you would obviously, if you want to just write a simple test, you would go by this approach, right? So uh, now coming back to, once we have understood the structure, coming back to the page object model now. So if you go back, in the visualization part, we just said that we visualize our page as a collection of services. In this case, the login page provides us 2 services: login without saving cookies and login with cookies saved, right? So all you have to do is go back to wherever your page objects are created, right click on the page object folder. So uh, before creating the class, it's always better to have packages separating out the classes. So the test should be in the test package, and the page objects should go into a respective package which talks about the page objects. So right now we have the page objects package. I'm expecting that all the page objects will go inside this package. So all I will do, I will just right click on the package, do a new class, and once you create a new class, all you have to do is give the name of a class. In this case, as I'm creating a login page object model, so I would simply say login POM. You can have a different naming convention in your company, but for the sake of simplicity and just to understand the concept, we will name it login POM, and I will do a finish. So once you have created the class, this is the basics of your, this is the very framework of your page object model. So the very bare bones structure of a page object model. So you would write some comment here so that anyone who's using your class can understand. All right, so once you have done this, now all you have to do is create the services or the interfaces that you have on the page as methods. So all you have to do is just have a method called login without saving cookies. For the time being, we are just creating dummy methods, in the sense they don't have anything inside it, but later on we will fill these gaps as we progress towards the final page object model. So public void, and the second method would be login with cookies saved. Right, so there we get your login page object model. It's a very simple class. It has 2 methods which expose the interface of the page which a user will interact with. So a user is only worried about login without saving cookies or login with cookies saved. He or she is not worried about the kind of elements that are present inside the page. Right. So once you have this, you have a basic structure of your login page. Right. So this is the login page. We have 4 elements here. We have just created 2 services out of it. Right. Now you have created a login page object model, but then it requires a couple of things, right? Internally, it would require a web element, right? It would require web elements that are present here. So what you will do, you will create members inside your class, and you would say that this is my first element, which is the username. And then you would create another element called web element password. And then you would create a web element called remember me. Let me just correct it. And then at the end, you would create another method, another element called login button, right? And you can have the type of element described in the name itself. So username edit box, right? So you would create 4 members. right? You need these four members inside it because the class internally will have to interact with the web elements to perform actions, and the actions are these two methods, right? So let's say we go one by one. Let's say we first, let me just reverse the order. Uh, Let me just put it like this. Now let us go one by one. I will remove it out of view. Let us first implement our very first interface method, which is the login with cookies saved, right? So in order to implement this method, you would need the username. So all you would do is you would accept the username argument. You would need the password, right? These are the two things that you would require, right? So once you have these two things, you would just, once you have the requirements in your head, you would just accept it as the input arguments so that a test can pass in this information, right? So at this point in time, if you're not able to relate to it properly, don't worry about it, because once we use this inside the test, you would be very clear about what is happening. Right. So once you have the login with cookies saved, all you have to do is just implement the steps, the actions that you will use to log in. So the first thing that you would do, you would use the username edit box and you would send the username field to it, the username value to it, right? And then what you would do, you would use the password edit box and you will do uh, the password field, right? And at the end, all you would do is you would click on the login button. Right, so these are the three steps that you would do. So this is how you will implement your very first method inside your login page object. Now let us implement the second method. Right, in the second method, what are your requirements? So this is the way you will approach a page object model. So once you have your interface or your service method on the page, you would look for what are the requirements of the service page. What are the requirements of this particular interface? So you would say that this interface requires a username, just like um, the method that we had above. It also requires a password. At the same time, it requires uh, or it doesn't require it, because we just have explicitly made this as saving cookies. So now it requires a username and password, and it will perform somewhat similar actions. It would go to the username edit box, it will send keys. It will go to the password edit box, it will send keys. And then at the end, not at the end, the second last step that it will do is to click on the remember me checkbox. Right, so it will click on the remember me checkbox so that that particular option is selected, and then it will just do a click on the login button. So what has just happened here, let me expand the page. So what is, and let me see if we can, yeah, let us just reduce the size of it a little bit. So what has happened here is that you have just created a class. Inside the class, you have abstracted out the details of the elements. And by details of the elements, what I mean to say is that, let me put it in a 50-50 view. There you go. And let us just put this on the other side. Right. So what you have done is that you have created a class, and inside the class you have abstracted out the details of the elements. So there are 4 elements here. So these 4 elements, they directly go inside the class, and then you expose the functionality to the page. The functionality of the page is that you can log in with cookies saved, and you can log in without saving the cookies. Right. So this is how you create a page object model. Now, this page object model is yet not complete. The reason being that you haven't created you haven't written any code which will initialize your elements. Right? These elements are just declared. They are not initialized yet. Right? So what you will do, you will simply create a login. Uh, you will create the constructor of the class. Right? And to find elements, you need a WebDriver. So you will take WebDriver as the input argument, and whoever creates a page object model of a login page will give you the driver. And using the driver, all you would do is just do something like this. Now, this is one way of doing one way of initializing your page object model. Then there is this another way which Selenium provides. So we will just look into that way. Yeah. So I can see a couple of questions there, but we will come to the questions in a minute. So yeah, so this is a very crude way of doing it. Don't rely on this. I'm just explaining it to clear the concept, but there is a much better way to initialize your page object model. So we will look into that. So all you have to do is once you create the login form, all you have to do is just find the right elements. So I would say that I want to find the username edit box. How can you find the username edit box? You will go back to the page, right click on the username field and do a inspect. Once you do the inspect, it takes you directly to the element which has directly to the element which corresponds to this username, directly to the code which corresponds to this particular element. So here you can see that this element has an ID of log, right? This is the ID. An ID is a unique identifier. So what I will do, I will just simply say that can you find me an element which has an ID equals to log. So I will repeat the step for the password, and let me quickly see what password is. The password has an ID of pwd. So I will quickly go back there and I would say that can you find me an element which has an ID of pwd, right? And similarly we will find the remember me checkbox, and I would simply say driver.find element, and let us quickly see what this thing is. It's an input box and it has an ID of remember me. So I would simply say by.id and remember me. And then at the end, we have to find the login button, right? So I would simply say login button equals to find element, and then I would do by.id, and let's see what the ID of login button is. The ID of the login button is ID equals to login. So I would simply say login, right? There you go. You have a page object model created for yourself. This is a page object model which is able to initialize all the elements that are present inside the login, the page object, and it's able to provide two services, which are the login with cookies saved and login without saving the cookies. Right. So this is a very simplistic form of a page object model. We have just taken a very simple example to clear the concept. But the whole idea is that you don't expose the element level details inside a POM. I'm sorry, you don't expose the element level details inside the test. You abstract it out inside a class, and the class is called the page object model. So it is basically a model. You can interact with the model using the methods that it provides. You can just interact with the methods. You don't have to worry about how those actions are performed, right? Let us see this thing quickly with an example. So we have a login page object model. Let us write a test around it. Don't worry about this test. We will come to this test when we will try to understand the importance and the benefits of page object model. So let me just quickly create another test. And let's say, let me just have enough space so that the other part is removed from screen. So I will have a test called login test with POM, right? All I need to do is the very first thing that I want to do. So taking a look at the test structure. So what happens is that during the setup of the test, a Chrome driver is launched. We are taken to the demoqa.com page, and then we simply put a timeout. So I will always be on the demoqa store.demoqa.com. So if I go back there, so I will always be here, right, on this particular page. So the very first thing that I want to do is I want to click on the My Account link. So in the test, I would simply copy the code. I will click on the link. And once I click on the link, I want to log in, right? So all I would do is that now coming back to the application, once you click on the link, you know that you will reach to the login page, right? You are there on the login page. So all you have to do is, yeah, all you have to do is just create your login page object model. So you would say login form, login page equals to new login form. And then you would pass on the web driver, which is this here. So once you do that, let me just quickly import the login form. And once you are here, you can directly use this object and you can say that, well, before using this object, let us quickly see what are the methods that it exposes. So if you do a login.page, you would see that there are two methods called login with cookies saved and login without saving cookies. Right. So let us try to log in without saving the cookies. So all you have to do is you have to give a username, right? So let us just give a dummy username. Uh, test user, where is that? Username and a dummy password. We are not worried about the fact whether we are able to log in or not. We just want to see the concept working, right? So I would simply say test password, and there you go. So we are there. So a test has been reduced to 4 lines. So you created a login page object model and you just called a method on the login page, right? You don't have to worry about how this class internally would deal with the intricacies of writing the username, writing the password, and then clicking on the login button. All that details are abstracted out in a class called login form. For a test, it doesn't have to worry about how those things happens. A test will simply call the method, provide the required information, and then the work should be done. Right. Now let us quickly see how this will work, right? So what I would do, I would create it a test method. Um, so I would just put a @test uh, annotation there, and I will debug this, right? So I hope everyone is familiar with. I think there was a problem with the voice. Laksh, do we have a problem with the voice?
Evelyn, it is clear.
It's clear, right?
I don't know why, yeah, Kirtana has faced some issue, but it was clear from my side. So don't worry.
Okay. All right. That's great. So coming back to the point, I've just created a test and I've used the page object model to demonstrate how it works. We will debug it, right? So I hope everyone has debugged their tests or any sort of Java code earlier or any sort of other uh, programming language code uh, before. So I hope you are aware with basics of debugging. So what I will do, I will just put a breakpoint here at the login page. So to put a breakpoint in Eclipse, just double click on this blue ribbon that you get on the left hand side before the line number. Just double click on it, you will get a breakpoint, a small blue dot, right? So now all we have to do is right click here, do a debug as test-ng test, right? Let us do that. And let me put it in a 50-50 mode. Can we put it? Yeah. So we are here in the 50-50 mode. It's running, and it should stop here, right here, after performing all the relevant actions. So it launches the Chrome browser, and let me just cancel this thing. It goes to the login page, and once it goes to the login page, it will stop because I have put a breakpoint here. You can see that it has stopped, and let me try to increase the surface area of this particular code. Yeah, so now you can see that I have stopped here. There is this blue marker here, right? So it says that you have stopped here. Now we are on the login page and we are about to create a login page object model. So to understand how this page object model will be created, let us step inside this code. So if I step inside this code, it will take me to the login page object model constructor, right? In the constructor, what we are doing is that we are creating our internal web elements which correspond or which are on the page of the page for which we have created a page object model. So all I will do, I will just step over them. The very first thing, I will get the username. You can see that there is a valid username field, and then I would again step over. I will get a valid password field. That's great. And let us just do this for remember me and login button. So we have valid fields that we got inside the page object, right? Now, this is how a page object will be constructed. Once it is constructed, let me step over. Okay, is it doing something? Just give me a minute, I think. Okay, just give me a minute. It basically stopped right here. So let us push it. Yeah. So once the page object is created, now you can see that you from the test side, from the perspective of a test, you don't have to worry about how to find these elements, right? They were found inside the class. You don't have to worry about writing the find by statements, right? All you have to do now is that you just have to call the method, the service, the interface that we were talking about on the page. You just have to call that particular service or interface. If we step inside it, let us step inside this. So you would see that, let me increase the surface area here. So let me just increase it. So you would see that it will take you to the service method, right? Uh, the service on the page object model, right? It takes you there, and to this method you have passed two values. You have passed the username, which is test username, and you have passed the password, which is basically test password. So once you have passed this information, all you have to do is see how it works. So inside this method, you would be sending the username, you will get the username, you would sending the password, you will get the password, and then you would click on the remember me checkbox. Well, I think I've just reversed the methods, but you got the concept, right? So it will just click on the remember me checkbox, it will click on the checkbox, and then it will do a click so that it logs in, right? So you would see that your page object model just works fine, right? Now, this is a very basic page object model. This is how you can create a very basic page object model. Now, this page object model can directly be used by your test or by the tests of your teammates, and they don't have to worry about how a particular functionality works. For example, if I'm not a member who's working on the login functionality, I don't have to understand the login functionality. All I have to do is just create the respective POM. Whatever page I am on, I have to just create the POM, and then I have to call a method on the POM. And I don't have to worry about how anything happens on the page. So I don't have to worry about how exactly the login steps happen. I will just pass on the relevant information and internally it will happen. Right. So this is the benefit of the page object model. You can see that we will be talking about the benefits in a minute, but just to explain it here as we are here now, uh, you can see the tests are very precise, very concise, and they are to the point. Just by looking at the test, you can say that, okay, we are trying to go to the login page, and then we are trying to log in without saving the cookies, right? So just by looking at the test, you can easily figure out what the test is doing, and in contrast, or if you look at the other test, actually, let us talk about it when we are there. So the number of lines of code that you have to write will reduce significantly. I want to explain the benefits when we reach there in a minute. Uh, in another few slides. So this was a basic page object model, and I hope the concept was clear. Laksh, I think we can take up questions right now for this particular model, and then we will talk about the more detailed one.
Yes, Virendra, sure. But as such, there are no questions I can see. But yes, you can ask the audience if they have.
All right. So I think yeah. So let us spend 5 minutes to pick up questions, and let's see if we have any question and was there any confusion in the concept. So I see that Sukumar Tunga has a question. All right. So if you have a question, just type it down here in the chat window, and Laksh will pick it up, and I will try to answer that. So Sukumar has a question: what happens if the ID or XPath changes? So Sukumar, as you can clearly see that if the ID or password changes, all you have to do is just go back to the login class and change the way you are finding the element. That's all. I hope that answers your question. And let us see what we have. Questions. Let me just quickly see that. Just give me a minute. I will uh, pick up the next question. Hey, Laksha, I'm not able to get this.
Okay, Viren, let me
Yeah,
read out
can
to
you?
you.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. So sorry for that, Laksh. I got it. All right. So okay. So Rosie has a question. Could you tell where have we used abstraction encapsulation? Where is actually abstraction and encapsulation being used? So well. Let me just change the view of the project first. All right, so Rosie, when you create a class and you hide the internal implementation of the class, that's when you have created encapsulation. And when you hide, when you just provide a couple of methods to interact with the class, at that point you have created the abstraction part also. So if you look at the test perspective, the test doesn't have to worry about how a login page is created or how you can log in on using that page. It just needs to know what is the information that it has to pass. So that is where we have used abstraction and encapsulation. Does that answer your question, Rosie? All right. So, all right. So let me just pick up another question. Uh, is there any way we can capture all the elements of a page in one go? Oh, Dipendra, yes, of course. If you look at the code here, we are just capturing 4 elements. You can just add more code to capture more elements. All right. Then we have Muhammad Azruddin saying, is there any advantage of using web element and driver in the constructor? Well, Mohammed, just to demonstrate the concept of page object model, we have the used the constructor way of constructing the page, but this is not the desired way. I will just talk about the desired way in a minute. Uh, and let me see what we have. Apurva, which is the best selector for XPath other than ID? Apurva, actually, whatever is unique is the best. So just find the unique one. Don't worry about the performance and all that thing. Just find whatever is unique, just use that. Okay, so Sukumar, I think you're not getting the concept correct. Just give us a few minutes, and when we will uh, talk about the benefits of page object model, we will see how it is beneficial. So Sukumar has a question. Then, so basically, his initial question was, what if the XPath changes? Then we have to change it in the login form, right? Which is quite obvious because it's a code. It's not magic. You have, if something changes, you have to change it there, right? So, but then Sukumar has a follow-up question. He's asking, then there is no use in having a POM, right? I can directly use web element in the test. Well, that's a very fair point, Sukumar, and I will show you why that is not a good idea to do that. that's not a good idea to actually use the web element in the test. For that, just let's wait for the pros and cons of page object model. And uh, Amendra has a question. Can we maintain any object repository file to uh, save IDs X path of web elements? Well, Amendra, it's up to your framework. You can have it in a file. You can have it somewhere stored, and then you can use all the locators. Uh, Nivas, the question by Nivas is that should we use by keyword to locate the elements, or locating inside constructor is the best way to go about? Well, Nivas, locating inside the constructor is not the best way. We will talk about it in a minute. So uh, Marty has a question where we will verify whether elements are enabled in the website. Well, Marty, that is something which is very specific to the problem that you are solving. So I think it will come as you write your page object. Uh, I would just pick up the relevant questions. Okay, so well, I think most of the questions are very specific to the kind of application that you're working on. So I would just skip them for the time being, because we are right here to discuss page object models. We are not here to solve problems in a given project or in a given environment. So I would just skip that part. Skip the other questions, and I would be very specific that ask questions related to the concept, and I will pick it up. So now that we have understood the concept of page object model, we know how we can create a page object model. Let us see what Selenium provides us. So going back to the slides, I think we have already done this part. Going back to the slide, well, here we are just showing the process in which you have to create uh, a page object model out of a page. The very first thing is you identify the interfaces which you want to provide on the page, and then you have to create a class of the page, just like we created here the login form. Then once you have created the class, you expose the methods for actions and then use it inside the tests. So something very similar to what we did here. We exposed the methods and then we used it inside the test. All right, so now let's move on to the next part, which is @find by annotation, which is very important. Now, here you would see that what I did was I wrote down all my web elements in my class, and then I did a find by element, right? I'm sorry, I did a find element, right, to find the required elements. So this is a very error-prone process, because if one element fails, all your other elements will fail and the page object creation will fail, right? And why do you have to find the elements when Selenium is giving you a way to find the elements automatically, and it will reduce the number of lines of code that you write? So Selenium says that if you want to find an element, if you want to create a page object and you want to have an element uh, which uh, which is a part of the page object model, for example, the username edit box, all you can do, you can use our annotation called find by, and this annotation is present inside the selenium.support package. So just use that, and inside the um, annotation, you have to do two things. You have to tell us how to find the element, how dot, you can choose, so you can say how, and then how you want to find it. I want to find it with ID, and what value do you want to use? So I would simply say that using the value which is log. Right, so all you have to do is just annotate your objects properly, annotate your web elements properly, and you should be good to go, right? So all I would do, I would just try to remove this part of the code, and I will simply write all @find by annotation. So I would say I want to identify my password field with ID, and the value is PWD, Similarly, I want to go here. I want to find the remember me, which is by using the ID remember me, and then at the end I want to find the login button, and the ID of the login button is this, right? So once you annotate your objects properly, you you don't have to use this part. You can just completely remove this. All you have to do is you have to call in a class called PageFactory. As the name suggests, it's a factory. This is a static class in Selenium. All you have to do is PageFactory dot, and you can say initialize elements. When you do initialize elements, just pass on the driver and a reference to the current class. So when you do that, you would what it would do is that PageFactory will, using the driver that you have provided, it will create all the internal members of this class. This means the current context. So if you are familiar with Java, this means the current context. And at this line of code, the current context is the login form class. So all it does is that it initializes all the elements inside this class with the locators that you have provided. So it will try to find all the elements with the required locators, which you have mentioned here. And you can see that the annotation is very aptly named find by. So it will just find the elements in the initialize elements call, and it will just give them the right values. So you don't have to write all the find by code, find element by code as we did earlier. Now let us quickly run this part and let's see how it works. I'll go back to the login test and I will just do a run as this time. I won't wait for the debugging session. So I would just do a run as, and let's see how it works. So it takes you to the login page. I'll just cancel this thing. It will enter the username and password. It was very fast, but it entered the username and password and everything just worked fine. So what we have achieved here is that in the login page, if we go by the PageFactory model, if we go by the class that is provided to us by Selenium, we save a lot of lines of code. We don't have to write our own find by logic. We can just annotate it properly, all the objects properly, and the PageFactory, by the name, you can see that it is a factory which creates a page. Right, so the PageFactory will automatically take care of it. It will create my elements for me, and I don't have to worry about it. Right. So and also one important benefit that I see is that my web elements, my internal members, they look clean, right? I can quickly see and find out that, okay, this is a password edit box. You can find it by ID and the value is PWD, right? So this is the benefit that you get after using the PageFactory provided to you by Selenium itself. All right, so I think that was quite clear. I think that concept was clear, and I can see that we have two people who have raised hands, Chaudhry Dash and Marthi, and then we have Aruna. We also have Neeraj. So let me just quickly ask one by one. Let me just pick up these three uh, questions. Uh, Chaudhry Dash, do you have a question?
Hello,
Yeah,
hello.
yes, we can
Can
hear
you hear
you.
me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, actually, my question is, so whenever you declare that class, like for login to a like page object model,
Uh-huh.
one thing I want to ask is, I have joined late. Okay,
Huh?
I am not there when you explain the first part. So I
Uh-huh.
want to know about that login, like find by annotation. Means
Uh-huh.
so actually, what important features find by annotation do in Selenium?
Okay. Okay, sure. So let me just quickly explain it again.
Yeah.
Uh, so I will put you on mute and just give me a minute. Uh, where is that? Yeah. All right. So find by annotation. I think it's been clear by it's clear for most of us. I will quickly repeat it. Find by annotation is used to specify the locator values. You can clearly see that find by annotation is saying that this particular element can be found by ID and the value of the ID should be log. And you can see that for all the other elements, remember me checkbox can be found by an ID, which is remember me. All right, so this is basically what the find by annotation does. Now, once you put a find by annotation on top of the element, the page factory initialize elements, what it does, it scans your class, it scans your login pom class, and it checks out what are the elements that I want to construct myself. And it will find that there are 4 elements which I have to construct, and 4 elements have the find by annotation specified. And these find by annotations, these find by using these find by annotations, it can actually find the element, right? So I think yeah, that's pretty much it, what find by annotation does. All right, so let me just quickly move on to Aman Kumar. Hey Aman, do you have a question? All right.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, Aman. Yeah, please go ahead.
So, what is the use of this keyword in PageFactory?
Okay, so this is a Java concept, this keyword. That's why let me put you on mute first. So this is basically a programming language concept construct. Uh, So this means the current context. So if this is used here, this means that this is referring to the login form class. So just to check that, all you can do is do a this dot, and you can see that all the internal members are available on this. So this is a special keyword inside a programming language, which takes up the value based on the current context. So if it is used inside the login pom class, this means that this particular class, which is the login pom. So if you do a this dot, you would see all the members of this class. So this is the concept of this. And when you say init elements and you pass this, it means that you have instructed PageFactory to initialize all the elements using the driver, and the elements are present inside this class. So these are the elements, right? So this is what this refers to. All right. All right, let me just, oh, I can see quite a lot of hands right now. Because of the time constraint, I would just pick up Aruna because she's been there for quite some time. Aruna, do you have a question?
Yeah. So the first thing is I have seen script where I have used page instead of page factory. So first I want to know the
Aruna, can you be a little louder, please?
yeah. So first question is, I have seen the scripts where I have used page instead of page factory. So I want to know the
Uh-huh.
difference when page factory should be used and when page should be used. And while using iterate find by, we can also use xpath is equal to or id is equal to. We can directly mention the locator exactly what id is, what xpath is. So
Yes.
how? So I want to know the difference. You are using how is equal to how dot id and
Yeah.
how dot expert. So how can we differentiate those two things?
All right. So let me just reiterate what Aruna has said. I'm sorry, Aruna, I've just put you on hold. Not so, sorry, not on hold, but I have put you on mute. So the question is, I have used this particular syntax to define the locators. I have used how.id and using equals to login. There is another way where you can directly say how.id equals to login. Uh, I think in Java that I haven't seen that syntax, but if you have that syntax, then it's all about the syntax. There is nothing that will change underneath. So you can use whatever syntax you like till the time you are using the find by annotation. Now the second question was the page factory dot init elements. Should we use this or the previous approach? If I got you correct, Aruna. So this was the question. So I would always suggest that go by the page factory. Don't go by the earlier approach that we took. Page factory provides you lots of benefits. It will do a lot of work for you. So if someone is already doing work for you, just use that class. I hope I was able to answer your question. And just, okay. All right. So, now let us move on to the next topic quickly. We are about to um, we are about to complete our session timing. So let me just quickly move on to the next slide. So this was the find by annotation, which we just discussed. This was the PageFactory, which we just saw in working. Let us see the next part, login page object. We have created our login page object, so we have seen the code as well, so we know how we can create the login page object. Now let me just quickly move on to the next slide, which is benefits of POM. Now, the very first benefit of POM that you get is you get code isolation. So what it means is that, let me just quickly see what it means. Let me show you the code. So what it means is that all the complexities related to the login page are inside the login class. So if you just take a look here, this particular code is inside the login class. No one outside this class has to worry about how the login page works, right? So this is how you can achieve code isolation. Now, let's take an example. You are in a team, it's a big team, and you are in the payments module, and then there is someone who's in the billing module, right? So you have your tests which talk about the payments and the uh, billing modules, right? And these tests, in order to execute these steps, sorry, in order to execute these tests, you have to go through the login page, and this is a requirement for your application. So in order to go from the login page to reach to your particular functionality, for example, the payments or the billing, which means that all the tests which are in the payments and billing, they have to write code to login, right? Because they all are dependent on login. So what happens in that case is that you have two options. You write the login step again and again in each test of your payments and the billing modules, or you create page objects and let the page object handle the complexity. And all you have to do in your test is you just have to call the page object and then perform the action that you want to perform. You don't have to worry about what and how a login page works. And then you can directly jump to your payment tests. Right. So it's a good way of isolating your code, and then it's again a good way of reusing the code. So you have just reused the code again in different modules. So that way you will have smaller number of lines of code, and the code will be reusable. Which is basically a very big advantage. Then at the end, you would have code in one place. Now, it's basically the same thing combined. If you combine the first 2 points, it will translate into the last point, which is one place to do it all. So you would see that login page, it's at one place. We know that there is a class called login form, and anything related to login will go in there. Now, if you have a change, let's say, and I think this was a question which was asked earlier by Siv Kumar, or it was asked by Sukumar. So the question was, if tomorrow the ID changes, well, let it be. All my tests are written over POM, right? So if the ID changes, I will just have to change my ID at one place. And if I use the find element or the web element in all the tests, I have to change my IDs in all the tests. So it's a choice that you have to make. Do you want to go ahead and have a low maintenance cost by creating POM, or if you're fine changing values and in multiple tests multiple times, it's a choice that you have to make. And the better choice is let it be at one place, so that if a change comes in, you just have to change it at one place and all the tests will start referring to the new value, right? So this is the benefit that you get out of POM. So these are the three benefits that you get. There are more benefits, sure. It follows the object-oriented design patterns and more reusable and more maintainable code, more intuitive code as well. What I mean by intuitive code is that let's say I'm a newcomer to this project, I can quickly go back and in the code and see that okay, there is a package called page objects. I'm expecting that all the page objects will go in there, and if I look at the classes inside the page object, I would see that there is a login form. So I can quickly make out that, okay, it's quite intuitive. There is a login class, there is a login form. So one should be using that, and login form would definitely abstract out the details of login functionality. So this is how it makes the code more intuitive. So these are 3 points that I wanted to talk about in the benefits of POM. And what next? So once you have understood POM, what is the next thing that you have to do? Now, you have understood POM in a very minimalistic way. I would say that you just have understood the concept and you have just created a very small page object model. Right. So you have just we have just created a very simple page, login page. Now, moving forward, this would not be the case in your real life project. There, you would have more complex pages, right? So in that case, you would also need to understand how you can create complex forms, complex page object models. Now, complex page object models are not a single class. They are actually multiple classes and which are bind together using any inheritance principle. Using the inheritance principle. So those are the complex forms that you would need to understand as you move forward. And once you understand the complex form, then you would also want to understand nested forms. Now, nested forms are basically, again, a form of inheritance where you have the contain inheritance where one class contains the other, and you can divide your complex page object into smaller modules, smaller page objects, and then you can contain all these smaller page objects into a bigger one to create the complete page. Now that is another concept that you would want to learn as you move forward so that you can become more proficient in your project. And these are the things basically you get yeah basically, these are the questions you get in the interview, and these are the things that you basically the interviewer asks you. They will ask you about the page object model. Most of us would just say that a page object module is something, and we would just recite a definition from the internet. But we have to understand the true meaning of page object model, what it theoretically is trying to do, what it is fundamentally trying to achieve. So we have just discussed those parts in details today, where we understood the whole concept of page object model, we understood why it is required, and we saw the benefits in front of us. So if I go back to my login test, so I created another test earlier, and as Sukumar was mentioning, in the test I used the web element directly, right? So this is a test which does the same thing which we are doing here. It does the same thing. It finds the my account link and then clicks on it, finds the username, password, and login button, and does the relevant action on it. But the whole point is that now these steps will be repeated again and again in the other tests. For example, this is an invalid login test. So if I have to write valid login test, let's say, all I have to do is again copy everything, and then once I copy it, I would add, like I would just change the password or something to a more valid one, right? But the whole point is that you have repetition of code. You are just doing the same thing again and again. Now the whole point is that if you're doing the same thing again and again, if the value changes, if the ID changes for the password field, you have to change it everywhere, right? So that way it becomes a cumbersome task to actually maintain that code. So the page object model basically uh, tries to minimize that problem or reduce that problem, and it will basically try to uh, ease the code that ease the maintenance effort that you want to put. Now, Sukumar has a very important and very valid suggestion. Sukumar, just give me a minute and let me get to that. I've just lost the question. Uh, Can I see that? All right, so I'm there. Yeah, so basically Sukumar is saying that uh, instead of repeating the test, you can create a utility function in a separate class. You can create a utility class, and there you will have a uh, login method, and you can use that method. Well, that's a very valid and a very good suggestion, that you can create a utility method, right? In the utility method, just name it as login, right? Login with cookies or login without saving cookies. Now, that is perfectly fine, and that will work as well. But the whole point is that uh, here in page object model, you have the utility method attached to a particular class. So you know that this method belongs to the login page. Right. Let's say in your application there are two logins at two different stages. You have a login uh, at the very first page, and then you have a login when you try to see more protective information, for example, your PAN number or something like that. So in that case, utility functions needs to be named that way. But here in this case, you have a more intuitive structure, and both of them basically does the same thing. This can also be considered as a utility function, but it is attached to a class which has a meaning, right? Which is basically talking about the login page. So that is the benefit that you get. But yeah, basically we are trying to achieve the same thing. We don't want to write code again and again. We want to reuse it and reuse it as much as possible. All right, so this brings us to the next part of and let me just quickly see what we have here. Yeah, so we have a quick example here of Flipkart. So if you look at the Flipkart, the complex form and the nested form that we were talking about, if you look at the Flipkart, uh, you can see that this is a fairly complex page, right? So it's a fairly complex page. You have a top bar, you have a search menu, you have like the deal of the day, and you have Flipkart Assured. There are like a lot of small sections on the page, right? So these kinds of page, they cannot be abstracted out by using one class, right? You have to divide the modules into smaller classes, and then you have to nest them together, or you have to combine them together in one way to form a bigger class which represents the Flipkart page. So Flipkart page will have a smaller module, a smaller class called the search class. Then it will have the top bar class. Then it will have the deal of the day class. So that way you can abstract out the complexity of the page, and at the same time you can write more targeted code in each class. All right, so yeah, those are the advanced concept, and I think I have a question here which says that will we cover the advanced concept in the next webinar? Well, we won't cover the advanced concept in the next webinar uh, because it gets a little tidy in a webinar when we have just 1 hour. We usually cover this in our training, which is our professional training that we conduct. So if you want to learn more about the complex form and the nested form, or the more details about Selenium and different types of frameworks that are available, then you can basically contact us, and you can join our session that is starting 1st of October. So moving on to the last part, which is thank you for joining in the session. And I hope the session was informative. And just before we shut down the session, let me just do one thing. Yeah.